What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. We got another Go Collect blog today that we are going to be reviewing by comic book lover slash licensed attorney Joseph Overatis. Again, if I butcher that name, I apologize, but I did a video last week discussing an article that he did on market manipulation. I thought he presented some great talking points. I didn't necessarily agree with everything he said, but we're going to look at this blog that he posted last week that talks about the three trends that are impacting the comic book markets right now. And again, I think he delivered a great oversight of this kind of talks and plays into my video that I did last week, asking the question, is COVID-19 affecting the value of our comic books? And although this isn't, specifically COVID-19 related, the current state of things is correlated to COVID, obviously. So he brings up three key talking points, and I love the way that he broke this down. He gives an observation and then he gives a little bit of advice. So, guys, let's get into these three trends that he talks about, and then let's kind of dive in further. So, the first thing he brings up, um, obviously, he introduces by saying that he notices that there's a lot of trends going on impacting the marketplace in both positive and negative ways that investors and speculators should understand to maximize profits. And then he starts out with this first observation, and that's no movies means an onslaught of misinformation. Pun in the play on word of onslaught. Um, he talks about the lack of movies has left investors and speculators without their investment GPS. Like, how do we navigate this time, right? He uses X-Men 53 here as an example that exploded in recent sales and price because a site theorized how Onslaught would be a great villain in a theatrical Avengers film, right? So what he's really talking about here is right now there's a lot of pure and simple rumor. Now, um, I talk about all the time the degrees of rumors, right, or spec when it comes to movie hype. From pure rumor that's nothing, that's like just fan fiction being talked about, to official announcements, right? So I think what he's trying to state here is that there is a lot of the going on at the lower level rumor mill that is really allowing collectors or speculators, investors to say, well, we have to be in charge of figuring out what's going to come next. We're sitting here waiting. We're itching. Um, we don't know what's coming for the past those films that were supposed to be released this year, right? So you know that the X-Men are coming in the MCU. You're speculating hard. You know that Fantastic Four are coming over. You're speculating hard. Is it going to be Silver Surfer? Is it going to be Galactus? Or is it going to be some random other characters like I've been talking about when you look at Marvel going cosmic, Eternity, you know, the Living Tribunal, all these different characters that have been overlooked. Are these the ones that are going to be showing up? Quasar, Annihilus. There's nothing there in terms of an announcement or in terms of any insider information. It's just us as fans and collectors really being the voices right now stating this is what could happen. So let's buy into it. We have nothing else, right? Um, Now, there are, don't get me wrong, and don't get this author wrong here either. There's obviously some announcements going on. It's just it's not to the level that we want. You got the Sony Spider Woman film. I mean, look at every single type of Spider Woman that's getting speculated on right now and driving values up. So from Spider Gwen to Jessica Drew, it's just that's all over the place. So. It's not black and white here, but I definitely agree with this observation that he's making that not in totality, but there are a lot of aspects that are really driving the rumor mill right now because of the lack of constant movement within the MCU or within cinema and film right now because it's just almost come to a completely dead stop halt, right? Uh, Let's see what he says for advice here. He says, look at books that have been neglected by the markets that do have some value. He gives an example for Flash Keys, First Prince of Trickster, Cat the Cold, and whatnot. And again, I agree. Look, if there's a lot of just rumor mill going on with certain books, probably especially a lot of Marvel books, um, hey, you know what? There are some other key books out there that aren't going to be commanding top dollar and that probably aren't moving in the market and really gaining a higher market value right now. If you're interested in capitalizing on a return on investment and you have the patience to sit with something long term, that's good advice to follow. I'm not going to argue that. All right, guys, moving on to his second observation here. He says, shuttered comic book stores, but higher prices. So let's read a little about what he's talking about. He states, I recently was made aware that a few local comic shops in my area are either shutting their doors or reimagining their business model. One owner I talked with that is recreating his business said that sale prices for the older books are surprisingly up. Hobbyists are spending more on quality books than before, but new merchandise is not selling. DC Comics distribution choice in the pandemic cut into the discounts that were being offered is seemingly to be in effect on the market. As a result, fewer new books were being purchased. Consumers still want to buy books, and they put their money into the older books. So this is the key point that he makes here that I agree with 100%. And I've been talking about this. And when we talk about, oh, COVID, everyone's getting stimulus checks and blowing their unemployment on comic books. And I'm like, first off, that's an extreme stereotype. And honestly, it's pretty prejudiced, if you ask me. It's very ignorant to say that because it says something to people that need stimulus money or need unemployment that they're just not being responsible and paying their bills, right? That we can't generalize. And I'm not going to sit and say there aren't some irresponsible people out there that are getting an unemployment check and, oh, I'm just going to go buy comics or I'm going to go buy a new stereo system or a new TV. It's not just comics. It's we as human beings. There are some of us out there that don't have any financial sense of what to do with money. So we blow it, you know. So it's not just about comic books, but this is a very important point that he makes to where people are having more expendable income. He states people who still have jobs and are not going out to eat as often because restaurants are closed. They're not watching movies in theaters because theaters are closed, or taking big vacations because national parks were closed, or travel restrictions and all these things. These are more feasible variables to look at to where why are people spending more money right now in other areas because we don't have as many expenses, and I talked about this. We're not going to the movies. We're not eating out. We're not doing all these things. So, hey, look, if you're a comic collector and you're still working from home and you're not spending hundreds of dollars a week on gas, for one, and you're not doing all these other extracurricular, uh, things that cost money, buy comic books. So, with more people, uh, with more money to spend, prices are increasing on the older books, is what he says. So this is really, really key right now to where going back to my argument about how is COVID-19 affecting our comics. It's not some manipulated trend. It's not that people are just blowing their unemployment money. It's that people just naturally, because of the way the world is right now, there are a good amount of people that have more expendable income right now, and they're putting it into whatever it is they want to put their money into. And for a lot of people, that is comic books. Okay. Let's see here. He says advice. People are getting wiser to their choices. That could be true. You have more people at home, more time on their hands that are watching content creators that are reading Go Collect or, you know, uh, uh, Cover Price or diving into their Overstreet and are just seeking for more and more, market data and market information. So again, he's talking about older books being focused on, and then he says, look for like second best things, and he talks about Marvel Team of 141 for a black suit appearance. If 252 is getting too hot or so forth. So again, interesting advice. I get it. I talked about going for second best right now, but the last time I checked, um, at least Secret Wars 8 and 141 were about having they were about the same fair market value. So I'm not too sure where 252 is. 252 might be a little bit higher currently than Secret Wars number 8 and Marvel Team Up number 1. So, all right, his last point, guys, which I thought was a very interesting point here. He talks about all-time low sales numbers. Now, let's just dive into this because I have some interesting points to discuss here. He says, I have said this before, but after 2010, I rarely give investment advice because, well, he's not really into modern books. It seems like it doesn't mean that he doesn't study the sales numbers. In my talks with investors and my own observations, I am seeing that new comic print numbers are at an all-time low. The pandemic was one reason. Another was the decline in LCSs to sell product to. Why print large runs when there are fewer buyers? Okay, let's continue. To satisfy the market that is buying books, DC and Marvel have seemed to focus on variants and first appearances. Characters are being introduced every week, and the hard part is picking the winners. I am scared taking these kind of risks with such characters as Punchline and Black Winter. If they do become comic book icons, the low print run may make owning a copy a rewarding one. Good point. But his advice, he does say, just do your research and pick the best of the first appearances. The best, I mean, do your research. I don't know if we can really pinpoint what the best is. He continues to state, remember, for every Venom, there is a Mace. Naomi was once red hot in markets, but now she has turned cold. Even with low print runs, you are taking a risk betting on these characters to be relevant in the future. I agree there. So let's go back to what he's talking about here, saying you have LCSs that are closing, or just in general, you have a smaller amount of LCSs now um, in the current uh, economic situation. It's hard for LCSs to withstand the modern market. Okay, um, it's not like the 90s or 80s or any time period at all. With that, he talks about buyers in the lower amount of print runs. And this is where I say right now it's not like the 90s at all when people try to argue that it is. You don't have the mass production of books, of issues. You do have what he brought up here, them focusing on different marketing tools, say variants or second print variants or and so forth. And look, it does something right now to keep buyers supporting the publishers and bringing in revenue for the publishers and for the LCS stores. But what does that mean for long-term value on this book? Um, for like new character hype and whatnot, it doesn't necessarily equate to long-term value. What it does equate to, though, and I still see this as a positive thing, is that these lower print runs are keeping a very feasible market for the publishers and the LCS stores. Okay, there's something there to keep demand out of the secondary market, and within the publisher market and the LCS market. Okay, there is demand because they're not being oversaturated. So regardless of long term value on the secondary market, what these publishers are doing with these low print runs are actually helping LCSs stay afloat and the publishers stay afloat and to keep that market going because it's attracting buyers that aren't in it necessarily for the long term investment. They're in it because there's the FOMO, the fear of missing out. They're in it because they're speculators that want to buy these books and try to flip them to make more money on the secondary market. So ultimately, this is more of a positive thing than a negative thing. I know people have brought up the fact that you know if you're offering 30 variants for one issue, what does that mean for the LCS and their limit orders from when they're ordering from Diamond? I don't know the details to that. That could complicate things, but I do believe that an LCS store does not need to order all 30 variants. They can order cover A and maybe three or four variants if they want for their store and be completely fine, right? with their inventory. So, and I do agree with what he's talking about just do your research because you're taking a risk for long term. I always talk about when it comes to long term, you really got to look at you know more of your Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Copper Age, but it doesn't mean that modern books, especially new release modern books right now, are not going to hold value. You're just taking a higher risk. There's more risk involved. So again, a lot of key points that he brings up here. I think ultimately, and let's read actually what he says right here in conclusion. He says the market is alive in more ways than one. He does say it's a collector's nightmare because it's the market's always changing, and I wouldn't call it a nightmare because I don't think it's that extreme of a change. You do have to keep up though. You have to understand all the variables involved and you have to be smart. But here's where it's not necessarily a nightmare and how we can continue to educate ourselves. We have instantaneous information at our fingertips, and I talk about that a lot. We have the internet. We have um, content creators like myself or bigger content creators like whether you love them or hate them, like Comic Tom or Comics with Bueller is another one. To Lords of the Long Box, you got Cover Price, you got Go Collect, you even have Key Collector, and look, I have issues with a lot of the information that's out there, but don't just sit on one source and make your decisions that way. We have so much information out there that allows us to keep up with what the market's doing. Educate yourself to financing, educate yourself to basic, simple economics, because these things play a factor into comic book collecting. And look, it doesn't have to be stressful, it can be fun. If you have the time in your hands, it can be fun and rewarding at the same time. And at the end of the day, if you're educating yourself, if you're reading these blogs and taking them with a grain of salt, but allowing yourself to navigate through them to try to pick them apart and take things here and take things from there, I think you're going to enjoy the hobby even more because you're going to be making more sound decisions for your collecting style, and you're going to educate yourself, and your collecting style is going to evolve as the market evolves, as the hobby evolves. So, again, look, I thought Joseph did a great article here. It's for me, this article isn't about agreeing with him 100%, because it's more of like you can read into these observations and really pick them apart and see what you feel like. Yeah, I see this happening here, and I can see that happening here, and you could find certain variables that to relate to each three things that he brought up. So, um, whether it's movies and there's a lot going on in the rumor mill, whether it's look, we're focusing in on more of those blue chip books and that's driving the prices, or look, there's lower print runs right now, and there's a lot of what some would say modern gimmicks, and it's risky to say if these are going to hold a long-term investment or not. All of them are extremely valid, but my final talking point is this, guys. It is still all 100% organic. All of this is organic because of the world that we live in right now, because of the economy that we live in, because of the technology that is at our fingertips. And yes, COVID has impacted that. Changes in expendable income has impacted that. And we just got to continue to navigate through. There's always ebb and flow in every market. Um, but I think, like he said at the end here, the market is alive in more ways than one. And I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon. So, with that being said, guys, collect what you're passionate about. In the good words of OMG Chris, be educated, be smart, keep loving what you do, and leave your comments below. Let me know your thoughts, guys. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Thank you for watching, and until next time.